In a world obsessed with speed, convenience, and digital precision, the pencil sits quietly in the background, ignored, underestimated, and yet always close at hand. It is not glamorous, it is not loud, it doesn't buzz, update, or notify. And yet, it has sketched the world we live in. The pencil is where stories begin. It is the first tool a child learns to write with, the silent partner in solving equations, composing sonatas, designing cathedrals. From artists to engineers, poets to physicists, the pencil has touched every idea before it became real. We don't think much about pencils. We sharpen them, break them, lose them, find them behind ears, in drawers, under couch cushions. We press too hard and snap the pencil lid. We scribble, we doodle, and somehow, through all of it, the pencil never complains. It simply offers itself again, ready to record another thought. No passwords, no loading screens, just graphite and wood. But the pencil is more than a tool. It is a triumph of ingenuity, a perfect marriage of nature and necessity. It is the result of centuries of trial and error, of political intrigue, of scientific discovery. Its story is not one of convenience, but of persistence. And once you start looking closely, you realize, the pencil is not simple. It is revolutionary. Think about it. A pencil can write for over 30 miles. It can draw lines with precision or emotion. It doesn't dry out. It doesn't run out of ink. It can be erased, redrawn, reimagined. It invites imperfection and revision. It forgives. And yet, for all its brilliance, the pencil has become invisible, overshadowed by the very tools it helped design, forgotten in drawers, left at the bottoms of backpacks, thrown away when they grow too short to grip. But this unassuming cylinder of cedar and carbon has influenced the course of art, science, literature, and war. Da Vinci sketched inventions with a stylus not unlike a pencil. Beethoven composed with one. Thoreau wrote entire books in pencil. NASA took pencils into space before computers could keep up. And before all of that, people risked their lives to mine the material that makes a pencil possible. Graphite, guarded like gold, smuggled across borders, hoarded for war machines. It's easy to forget that the things we take most for granted often have the richest stories. And the pencil's story is one of human curiosity, craftsmanship, and connection. It begins in a muddy hillside in northern England and stretches across continents. It spans the Industrial Revolution, the rise of public education, the development of mechanical engineering and fine art. It is the story of the rise of mass literacy, of tools in every schoolchild's hand, of thoughts captured instantly, anywhere, by anyone. So why do we overlook it? Perhaps because it's too familiar, too ordinary, too accessible. But that's exactly what makes the pencil extraordinary. It belongs to everyone. It is democratic, unpretentious, endlessly useful. It is the first tool of the dreamer and the last tool of the master. And in a world that moves faster every day, perhaps the pencil still offers something rare, the space to slow down, to think before pressing too hard, to draw without fear of mistake, to write something not because it's urgent, but because it matters. So, before we go any further, think of the last pencil you held. Do you remember where you left it? What you wrote or drew? Maybe it wasn't important, or maybe it was the beginning of something. This is the story of the pencil, not just as an object, but as a legacy. Quiet, persistent, precise, an unsung hero finally given the spotlight. So subscribe if you haven't already, drop your like and leave your comment for the algorithm and we can begin. Long before the first pencil was ever crafted, long before graphite was discovered or wood was carved to hold it, humans felt an urge, an urgent, powerful need, to leave a mark, to communicate across time and space, to record thought, memory, and imagination. Our earliest ancestors, tens of thousands of years ago, could not write with ink or carve letters into stone. Instead, they turned to the materials of their environment, charred sticks, animal bones, sharp stones, and colored earth. In the deep caves of Europe, places like Lascaux and Chauvet, ancient artists created vivid images of the animals they hunted and the world they knew. With hands and rudimentary tools, they applied charcoal and red ochre to walls, painting with a tenderness and care that has echoed through millennia. These were not merely drawings. They were stories, records, prayers, and perhaps even early attempts at language. Charcoal was one of the first tools used to draw. It was simple to make. Wood burned slowly in a oxygen fire, until it turned to blackened carbon. Charcoal's softness made it ideal for bold strokes and shading, but it was fragile, prone to crumble and fade. Yet, it was enough to transform blank stone walls into a canvas of human expression. The impulse to write, to draw, to capture, was insatiable. As human society evolved from hunter-gatherer bands into settled communities, so too did the tools they used to communicate. Around 3500 BCE, in the fertile lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, the Sumerians developed one of the earliest known writing systems, cuneiform. This system used wedge-shaped marks pressed into soft clay tablets. To make these marks, scribes used a stylus, a pointed instrument made from reed or bone. Pressing into wet clay, they created symbols that recorded trade transactions, legal codes, and mythic tales. These tablets, once baked and hardened, would survive for thousands of years, preserving the birth of civilization's written word. This early tool, the stylus, was simple but profound. It was a direct extension of the hand, translating thought into form. Farther south, in ancient Egypt, scribes used reed brushes dipped in ink made from soot and gum. Writing on papyrus, an early paper-like material crafted from the papyrus plant, they inscribed hieroglyphs, a system combining logograms and phonetic symbols. Egyptian scribes were highly trained artisans writing in long columns of delicate, flowing script. The brush allowed for elegant calligraphic strokes, but ink was precious and unforgiving. Mistakes could ruin entire scrolls. Meanwhile, in ancient China, the brush pen emerged as a sophisticated tool around the first millennium BCE, made with animal hair bound to bamboo shafts. These brushes could create expressive lines varying from thin to thick with a single stroke. The invention of paper in China around 100 BCE would revolutionize writing surfaces, offering flexibility and portability that previous materials lacked. Across the Mediterranean, Greeks and Romans adapted metal styluses to write on wax-coated wooden tablets. These tablets could be smoothed and reused, an early form of the notebook. They also used lead stili to scratch inscriptions onto softer surfaces, and ink pens crafted from reeds or feathers. Yet, despite these advances, early writing tools shared many limitations. They were often fragile, messy, or cumbersome. Ink dried slowly and could smudge. Writing surfaces were expensive or heavy. Erasing was difficult or impossible. For artists and writers, these challenges were frustrating. How could they capture fleeting ideas quickly? How could they draft, revise, or sketch without fear of permanent error? The search for a better tool, simple, portable, reliable, and forgiving, was just beginning. Though these early tools were monumental achievements, they were far from perfect. Ink could smudge or spill, parchment and papyrus were fragile and costly, and clay tablets were heavy and unwieldy. Writing was often a careful, deliberate act, mistakes difficult to correct. The quill pen, which emerged in medieval Europe from the feathers of geese or swans, allowed finer lines and more control than reed pens, but came with its own frustrations. Quills required constant sharpening and frequent dipping into inkwells, and the ink itself, while refined over centuries, remained prone to blotting and fading. Artists, scholars, merchants, and scribes all yearned for a better tool, one that combined ease of use, portability, reliability, and the ability to erase or revise. Various materials were experimented with: chalk for marking stone, lead styluses for writing on wax tablets, and charcoal for sketching. But none fulfilled all these needs. The ideal writing implement remained elusive. Then, in the late 1500s, a discovery in the quiet English valley of Borrowdale changed everything. What had been mistaken for lead was actually a new, remarkable form of carbon graphite. This soft, black mineral left marks darker and smoother than charcoal, but with far greater durability. At first, graphite was used primarily for marking sheep and other livestock, invaluable for farmers. But soon, artisans began cutting the graphite into sticks to use as writing and drawing tools. Yet graphite was brittle and messy, staining hands and clothing. It needed protection. Craftsmen began encasing graphite sticks in wood, creating a durable, convenient tool that could be held like a pen and sharpened when dull. The pencil as we know it today was born. The word pencil itself derives from the Latin penicillus, meaning little tail, a nod to earlier brush pens. However, pencils remained expensive and rare for many years, dependent on limited graphite supplies from Borrowdale, which the English government jealously guarded. The desire for pencils sparked innovation across Europe. Countries sought ways to mine graphite or invent substitutes. Methods of binding powdered graphite with clay emerged, allowing pencils to be manufactured even without pure graphite deposits. These developments paved the way for mass production, making pencils affordable and available worldwide. But the pencil's story is not just about materials or manufacturing. It is about human creativity and the desire to capture thought, imagination, and knowledge. From the first charcoal sketches on cave walls to the graphite pencils that would fill classrooms and studios, the journey of writing tools is a testament to our endless quest to express ourselves. The pencil is a humble tool with a rich heritage, born of innovation, shaped by culture, and carried forward by countless hands. As we move forward in this story, we will explore the pencil's evolution, from simple graphite sticks to precision instruments of art, science, and engineering. But it all begins here, with the ancient tools that paved the way. It began with a storm. In 1564, in the damp sheep-grazing hills of Borrowdale in Cumbria, England, a tree fell. Its roots, ripped from the ground by the wind, revealed something dark beneath the soil, dense, smooth, heavy, a substance unlike anything the locals had seen before. It was black, it was soft, and when rubbed against stone or cloth, it left a bold, dark mark. The farmers who found it assumed it was a form of lead. It looked like lead. It stained like lead. They called it plumbago from the Latin plumbum, meaning lead. And for centuries, the misnomer would stick even now. People still refer to pencil lead, though the substance in question contains no lead at all. The strange material was, in fact, a rare and unusually pure form of graphite, a crystalline allotrope of carbon, and the deposit in Borrowdale would become the only known source of pure solid graphite in the world for more than 200 years. At first, its uses were simple. Shepherds used chunks of the graphite to mark their sheep. It was perfect for this, leaving strong, visible lines, easily held in the hand. But it didn't take long for its usefulness to spread beyond the pastures. Artists discovered it made for an ideal sketching tool. Scholars found it easier to use than ink for drafting notes. Craftsmen, cartographers, woodworkers, and tradesmen found it perfect for measuring and marking surfaces. Its utility crossed professions almost immediately. But graphite was fragile. It snapped easily, crumbled under pressure, and left powdery smudges on the skin. It needed a casing, something to support the material and guide it. The earliest attempts were simple and improvised. Graphite sticks were wrapped in string or cloth, and as the material wore down, the string would be unwrapped a bit at a time to expose more of the core. Some clever users inserted graphite into hollow reeds, or into split pieces of wood that were glued or bound together. These were the first true pencils, in a primitive form. They didn't look like the modern yellow note, too, but the idea was already in place. A portable, self-contained writing tool that required no ink, could be sharpened to a point, and allowed for sketching, note-taking, and measuring with remarkable ease. Word of Borrowdale's black stone began to spread, and with it, the English government took notice. Graphite wasn't just useful for writing, it was also found to have military value. It could be used in casting cannonballs. Lining molds with graphite allowed for smoother, more accurate results. It became a strategic material, vital to England's military interests. Fearing exploitation, the Crown took control of the Borrowdale mine. Strict security measures were imposed. Graphite was mined in secret, under guard, and transported with great caution. Smuggling graphite out of the country became a serious offense. The purity of Borrowdale's graphite made it unlike any other source known at the time. Other deposits in Europe contained impurities, requiring refinement. Borrowdale's required none. It could be sawn into rods immediately, with no processing. This gave England a monopoly just on the material, but on the high-quality pencils that could be made from it. For a time, if you wanted a pencil that marked cleanly and darkly, you had to get it from England, and England wasn't selling its secrets cheaply. Pencil making was still a handcraft in these early years. Skilled tradesmen would cut wooden sticks, hollow them out or split them lengthwise, insert the graphite rods, then glue or bind the halves back together. Each pencil was a small work of craftsmanship. There were no factories yet, no mass production, just wood, glue, and the precious black core. Meanwhile, across Europe, the demand for pencils began to grow. By the late 16th and early 17th centuries, references to pencils began appearing in literature and correspondence. Some called them plumbago pens, others used the term stylus, but over time a name emerged and began to stick. The word pencil comes from the Latin penicillus, meaning little tail, a reference to a small brush used in painting. Originally, the term applied to fine brushes used for detailing, but over time, the word shifted, gradually coming to describe the graphite-based writing tool we know today. The pencil had entered the scene, quietly, without fanfare, but it was already changing the way people wrote, planned, measured, and drew, and it was only just beginning. As the 17th century progressed, England's monopoly on high-quality graphite became a matter of international interest and tension. Other nations sought their own sources or attempted to replicate the qualities of Borrowdale graphite, but no other deposit came close. This exclusivity gave rise to a bustling underground trade. Smugglers would sneak chunks of raw graphite out of the mines and across borders. Some bribed officials, others hid the precious black stone inside barrels, under false floors, or even inside livestock. The secrecy surrounding the mine and the intensity of control foreshadowed what would later become known as the Graphite Wars. But even within England, supplies were limited. The Borrowdale deposit, though rich, was finite. Mining was done manually, by candlelight, deep underground. Workers were watched closely, their tools inspected to ensure they weren't sneaking away fragments in their boots or under their clothes. As demand grew throughout Europe, pressure mounted to find alternatives or to steal the secret outright. Germany became a hotspot of experimentation. Without access to Borrowdale's pure graphite, German craftsmen were left with a problem. How could they make high-quality pencils using inferior materials? It was here that a breakthrough occurred. In the late 18th century, a German cabinet maker named Caspar Faber, working in the town of Stein near Nuremberg, began experimenting with ways to bind powdered graphite together. Instead of relying on solid graphite rods, he mixed lower-quality graphite with clay and water, then fired the mixture in a kiln to harden it into a usable core. This was a revolution. By adjusting the ratio of graphite to clay, Faber and other innovators could control the hardness or softness of the pencil. More clay produced a harder, lighter mark. More graphite yielded a softer, darker one. This method not only solved the problem of impure graphite, created the foundation for the modern pencil grading scale, which we still use today. From hard H to soft B, with HB in the middle, it also opened the door for mass production. Once the core mixture could be created from powdered graphite and formed into uniform rods, pencils could be made more consistently, at larger volumes, and at lower cost. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, pencil production was becoming an industry. Across the Atlantic, Americans were also beginning to take interest. In the early 1800s, a young naturalist named Henry David Thoreau, along with his father John, began making high-quality pencils using graphite from a deposit discovered in New England. The Thoreaus improved upon the German clay graphite method, and their pencils were considered among the best in America at the time. Before he wrote Walden, Henry David Thoreau was part of a pencil-making family, one of the earliest in the United States. And yet, even with industrial progress and growing global interest, the pencil remained a quiet force in the background. It was in the hands of artists, mapmakers, engineers, schoolchildren, and soldiers. It was used to sketch ideas that would become patents, plans that would become buildings, drafts that would become books. And despite the growing reliance on ink, the pencil offered something ink could not. Forgiveness. It could be erased. It invited revision, allowed for spontaneity, and offered control. Light pressure for faint lines, heavier strokes for bold ones. It was portable, self-contained, and affordable. By the dawn of the 19th century, the pencil had spread across Europe and North America. Though it had been born in the hills of northern England, it now belonged to the world, and as international conflict loomed, its story was about to take another unexpected turn, one filled with secrecy, strategy, and war. By the early 19th century, the pencil had evolved from a shepherd's tool into a symbol of quiet innovation. Artists used it to shape masterpieces. Engineers used it to blueprint cities. Writers drafted novels and revolutionaries sketched borders. And as education became more widespread, pencils found their way into classrooms across continents. But while the pencil itself was becoming a common object, the materials and knowledge behind it remained precious. The manufacturing techniques, the balance of graphite and clay, the quality of the wood casing, these were guarded secrets. Entire companies were built around them. Families like the Fabers, the Caigneurs, and the turned pencil making into a science, an art, and eventually a legacy. The French innovator Nicolas Jacques, a scientist and balloonist serving in Napoleon's army, played a crucial role. In 1795, during a blockade that cut off access to English graphite, was commissioned by the French government to create an alternative. Using low-grade powdered graphite, he developed a method similar to that of German manufacturers mixing graphite with clay, shaping it into rods, and firing it in a kiln. But didn't he stop there? He encased the cores in wood, refining the design and standardizing the production process. His technique became the industry standard, and his name still appears on pencils to this day. Thanks to these advances, pencil making no longer depended on Borrowdale's pure graphite. A new era was underway, one that could meet global demand without relying on a single mine in northern England. Still, Borrowdale retained its mystique. Its graphite was so pure, so unique, that it remained a coveted material for special applications even as industrial methods moved beyond it. But the world was changing. The 19th century was a century of wars, revolutions, and empires. The pencil, unassuming as it seemed, was swept up into these broader tides. It became a tool of bureaucracy and empire, used in colonial administration and military engineering. It became indispensable for cartographers and surveyors mapping newly claimed lands. It became, quietly, a tool of war. During the Napoleonic Wars, World War I, and especially World War II, the pencil took on new and unexpected roles. Its small, innocuous form made it the perfect vehicle for concealment, both for secrets and for survival. Pencils were hollowed out to hide tiny maps. Invisible ink was embedded in erasers. Tiny blades, rolled papers, and microfilm were smuggled past enemy lines, all tucked inside what appeared to be an ordinary writing implement. And still, at its heart, it remained what it had always been, a tool for thought. By the end of the 19th century, pencil production had expanded to every industrialized nation. Factories in Germany, France, the United States, and Japan were producing millions of pencils a year. They came in a variety of styles and grades, with different types of wood, cores, colors, and shapes. Cedar, especially California incense cedar, became the preferred wood, easy to shape, resistant to splintering, and pleasing to the hand. The modern hexagonal shape, designed to keep pencils from rolling off desks, became standard. Some pencils were round, some square, but the six-sided pencil remains iconic to this day. The pencil's journey had taken it from a chance discovery beneath a tree root in Borrowdale, through secret mines and royal patents, into classrooms, factories, and eventually, the battlefield. It had passed through the hands of kings, soldiers, engineers, poets, spies, and schoolchildren. And now, as it settled into everyday life, the world began to forget just how remarkable this little object really was. But behind its smooth wooden shell was a history of conflict, innovation, espionage, and revolution, a story that was far from over. In the next chapter, we'll dive deep into the hidden war beneath the surface, a battle for control, a war for resources, and the secrets hidden inside the world's most ordinary object. In an age of empires, resources meant power. Coal, iron, saltpeter, these were the lifeblood of armies and economies. But in the shadows of global politics, another resource quietly took its place among the world's most strategic assets: graphite. It was a black stone used for drawing or marking wood. To those in power, it was a material of precision, essential for casting cannonballs, protecting military molds, and producing weapons with accuracy that could turn the tide of war. In the 16th and 17th centuries, long before industrial espionage became a modern, the hills of northern England were already at the center of a resource war. The Borrowdale mine, nestled in the Lake District, held a secret so valuable that its access was guarded like gold. This was no ordinary mineral deposit. The graphite found beneath Borrowdale was uniquely pure, soft, solid, and could be sawn directly into usable rods. Other graphite deposits around the world were contaminated with quartz and impurities, and needed chemical processing. But this came out of the earth ready to change the world, and so, the British Crown protected it with unflinching force. Miners were watched closely. The mine's operations were shut down in intervals to avoid over-extraction or leaks of information. Workers were forbidden from carrying tools home. Guards inspected their boots, their pockets, their bags. Any graphite taken without permission was smuggled, and smuggling, if discovered, was punished harshly. Because England didn't just want to mine graphite, it wanted to control it. And so began the graphite wars, not with guns or swords, but with spies, smuggling rings, counterfeiters, and espionage networks that sought to steal what the English were guarding. Other European nations, France, Austria, Prussia, even Russia, were desperate for high-quality graphite, especially as the value of accurate cannonball casting became clearer in the endless wars of European expansion. Agents were sent under false pretenses. Some disguised themselves as artists. Others posed as merchants or engineers. Their mission: infiltrate the supply chain, discover the methods, steal the material. Some succeeded, most failed. Meanwhile, England fed its own pencil makers, each of them sworn to secrecy. Craftsmen in London and Keswick produced writing instruments for aristocrats, cartographers, and the military. Prices were high, the market was elite, but with scarcity came opportunity. Smuggling operations thrived in the shadows. Raw graphite was cut into chunks, hidden in hollow logs, beneath wagon floors, sewn into cloaks. Entire family networks became involved, mothers hiding pieces in loaves of bread, children running messages to corrupt officials. The black market was literally black, a world of shadowy deals over sticks of carbon. But as time went on, the Borrowdale mine could no longer meet global demand, nor could England keep the secret forever. Enter the counterfeiters. Across Europe, especially in Germany and France, inventors began trying to replicate the properties of pure English graphite. The material wasn't available in solid form, but what if it didn't need to be? What if powdered graphite could be processed? In secret workshops, artisans began crushing low-quality graphite and mixing it with water, flour, wax, resin, and eventually, clay. They experimented with binding agents, with baking methods, with compression and extrusion. Some results were useless, others, close, very close. Soon, a method was found. As we covered earlier, it was perfected in France and the Faber family in Germany. But behind these innovations was not just invention, it was desperation, driven by the demand for a resource the English refused to share. And just as graphite had fueled military power, it now fueled industrial rivalry. Even as the rest of Europe developed alternatives, England kept tight control over Borrowdale's mine. The Crown issued periodic closures to protect the supply, and smuggling continued well into the 18th century. One smuggler's journal entry, recovered centuries later, describes carrying graphite sewn into the hems of his cloak, wrapped in oilskin to avoid detection by moisture. Another tells of bribing a mine guard with a pouch of silver and a promise of safe passage for his son. These were not crimes of greed, they were acts of national interest. And as the centuries turned, and technology advanced, the pencil became not just a tool of industry or artistry, but a vessel for secrets. As Europe plunged into modern warfare, the pencil, humble and overlooked, once again found itself at the heart of global conflict. By the time the 20th century arrived, the age of open graphite monopolies had faded. The Borrowdale mine, once a military secret, was now a historic curiosity. Industrial advancements had solved the purity problem. Powdered graphite, blended with clay and fired into hardened cores, could be produced by any capable factory. But while the material was no longer a secret, its potential remained one. During World War I, and more dramatically in World War II, the pencil entered a new arena, espionage. The qualities that made pencils ideal for artists and architects, small, silent, easy to use, and silent, easily erased, also made them perfect tools for spies. In intelligence agencies across Europe and the United States, engineers began designing pencils with hidden functions. Some were hollowed out to carry microfilm, others were fitted with miniature compasses, tiny blades, or maps printed on silk so they wouldn't rust, tear, or crinkle. British intelligence, in particular, took the concept to extraordinary levels. The Special Operations Executive, so a secret wartime organization tasked with sabotage, espionage, and supporting resistance groups across Nazi-occupied Europe, developed an array of gadgets disguised as ordinary objects. Among them, the hollow pencil. To the untrained eye, it was a simple writing instrument, but inside, it contained tightly rolled documents, orders, escape routes, currency, even hair-thin saw blades. Some versions carried cyanide capsules for agents faced with the risk of torture or capture. Others included invisible ink, activated with heat or special chemicals, perfect for leaving hidden messages on innocent-looking documents. In the field, agents used pencils to sketch the layouts of enemy installations, mark drop zones, or scroll-coded messages that would later be decoded by handlers in London. Even the eraser innocent at a glance could be a decoy, concealing microdots or hollow compartments. One particularly clever invention from the SOE was a pencil that could explode a small, delayed fuse hidden in the shaft, triggered by sharpening it. It wasn't meant to kill, but to destroy documents or disable equipment in a pinch. The mere threat of such tools caused Nazi officers to inspect pencils closely, never quite sure what might be inside. The Americans weren't far behind. The Office of Strategic Services, OSS, the precursor to the CIA, developed their own versions of spy pencils, and also used them for message concealment, miniature maps, or code slips printed on cellulose paper. Pencils were issued to soldiers not just for notes, but for resistance training. In some survival kits, a standard-looking pencil could be disassembled into a signaling device. a fire-starting kit, or a waterproof match container. On both sides of the Atlantic, intelligence agencies understood that the best secrets were hidden in plain sight, and there was no object more ordinary, more universally ignored, than a pencil. Even in prison camps, pencils became weapons of quiet rebellion. Allied prisoners of war used them to draw false documents, sketch escape routes, or forge identification papers. In some cases, pencils were used to shade over hidden indentations, reading invisible messages, written by fellow prisoners who'd hidden notes in books or under bunk slats. To those behind enemy lines, the pencil became a symbol of resistance. It didn't draw blood. It drew freedom quietly, one line at a time. But even as the wars ended, and spy pencils faded into obscurity, the idea of the pencil as a tool of secrecy lingered. Cold War operatives continued using modified writing tools to pass intelligence. The KGB used a variety of pencil-like gadgets for concealed recording, signaling, or message drops. Western agencies did the same. In the age of atomic fear, sometimes the most powerful tool in a spy's arsenal wasn't a gun or a wiretap. It was a pencil with a hollow core and a message rolled tightly inside. And yet, through all of this, the pencil kept its public face. Quiet, cheap, forgettable. It was still in classrooms and art studios, still in the hands of schoolchildren and architects. But behind the curtain, it had also lived a shadow life passed hand to hand by spies, saboteurs, and freedom fighters. A reminder that even the smallest tool can hold enormous power, when placed in the right hands. After the global fires of the Second World War dimmed, a new kind of war began, one colder, quieter, but no less insidious. The Cold War wasn't fought in trenches or on open battlefields. It was fought in briefcases, in laboratories, and sometimes, in the stroke of a pencil. The age of the pencil as a covert tool hadn't ended with the armistice. It had simply shifted gears. Where once it carried hidden maps or microfilm across enemy lines, now it carried intellectual property, trade secrets, and the designs of the next great technological leap. And once again, the pencil found itself a player in the high-stakes game of global power. In post-war Germany, pencil manufacturers like Faber-Castell, Staedtler, and others found themselves rebuilding not just their factories, but their reputations and their markets. And in the East, Soviet-backed factories began to produce their own versions, often using industrial processes reverse-engineered from Western designs. Espionage had moved from the battlefield to the factory floor. The Western world had, for the most part, perfected pencil manufacturing by the mid-20th century. The best cores were now consistent, uniform, and scalable. The clay-graphite blend had been mathematically refined. The casing woods were optimized. California cedar became standard for its softness, grain, and durability. And machines could now produce thousands of pencils per hour. But the exact formulations, the proprietary mixes of clay, graphite, waxes, oils, and even the glue used to bind wood were trade secrets as closely guarded as military technology. In Japan, Tombow and Mitsubishi Pencil Company had emerged as serious players, producing pencils rivaling the best from Europe or America. And in the USSR, factories like the Siblag pencil plant churned out tools for engineers, writers, and bureaucrats by the millions. But many of those pencils, especially those used in technical drafting, had been modeled on Western originals, sometimes via industrial spying, other times through seized wartime equipment or blueprints. In a world divided by the Iron Curtain, pencils were just one more industry caught in the middle. In 1961, as Cold War tensions surged, the United States launched a mission that would put the pencil's reputation on trial, quite literally on a cosmic scale. American astronauts were preparing to travel to space. NASA, always concerned with reliability and safety, had a problem. Pencils don't behave well in microgravity. Graphite is conductive. Broken tips or floating dust could short out electronics. Worse, pencils are flammably a serious concern in the oxygen-rich cabins of early spacecraft. NASA needed an alternative. The myth that NASA spent millions developing a space pen while the Soviets used pencils is often repeated but not entirely true. In fact, both nations initially used pencils, but both quickly learned their dangers. Eventually, both American and Soviet space programs adopted a specially designed pressurized pen developed independently by Paul Fisher, which could write in zero gravity, underwater, and even upside down. NASA purchased them, so did the Soviets. Still, the pencil's limitations in space became a strange kind of cultural talking point, a metaphor for over-engineering, for practicality versus ingenuity. But what most people missed is that, even on Earth, the pencil was becoming more secretive. not less. In the 1970s and 1980s, as globalization brought brands closer together and competition exploded, companies like General Pencil, Musgrove, Derwent, and Caron Descartes protected their methods behind non-disclosure agreements, locked doors, and strict access control. Not because they feared foreign spies, but because even in peacetime, the formula for the perfect pencil was intellectual gold. And while espionage had become less about graphite and more about microchips, the pencil still held a place in the world of silent innovation. Even today, many pencil manufacturers will not reveal the exact proportions of their clay graphite blend. The temperature at which cores are fired remains a trade secret. The method for gluing cores into slats without warping, proprietary. Every element, from how the pencil is lacquered to how it is labeled, has been refined over decades, unguarded just as long. And yet, despite this secrecy, the pencil has never stopped being democratic. It is a tool of presidents and prisoners, of scientists and soldiers, of schoolchildren, artists, engineers, and spies. It has drawn maps and smuggled secrets. It has marked cattle and signed treaties. It has outlived wars, rewritten history, and hidden entire worlds inside its narrow frame, not because it is flashy, but because it is invisible, a thing we see, but never really look at, until now. As we leave behind the graphite wars, the smuggling rings, and the spycraft, we move into a new chapter, one that sees the pencil rise to new heights not in secrecy, but in art, industry, and culture. The battlefield may have quieted, but the pencil was only just beginning to show what it could really do. By the dawn of the 19th century, the pencil had already undergone a dramatic transformation. What had once been a shepherd's tool made from raw graphite and string had evolved into a carefully engineered writing instrument trapped in wood, shaped by hand, and sold by craftsmen. But this method had limits. A handmade pencil took time. It took skill. It required a piece of graphite to be cut, fitted, and glued into a wooden casing, each step performed by human hands. In a world on the verge of industrialization, that wasn't fast enough. Demand was rising, schools were spreading across Europe. Commerce was booming. The need for accessible, reliable writing tools was accelerating with every passing year. The time had come for the pencil to step out of the workshop and into the factory. The earliest stirrings of mechanized pencil making began, predictably, in Germany. In the town of Stein, near Nuremberg, a cabinet maker named Caspar Faber had begun experimenting with pencil cores decades earlier. But it was his grandson, Lothar von Faber, who transformed pencil making from a family trade into a multinational industry. In the mid-1800s, Lothar introduced systematic grading, branding, and mass production. He didn't just make pencils, he standardized them. He was the first to insist that pencils be manufactured to specific lengths, diameters, and grades of hardness, making them interchangeable and consistent. A 2B or an HB pencil meant the same thing across borders. This was revolutionary. The modern pencil had arrived not just in form, but in identity. For the first time, a pencil had a brand. Faber-Castell wasn't alone. Around the same time, other manufacturers were springing up, many of them rooted in the same region of Bavaria. Staedtler, another name still familiar today, emerged from the long tradition of Nuremberg's artisan pencil makers. Founded in 1835, the Staedtler family had been producing writing tools for over 100 years before formally organizing as a company. While Germany was leading the charge in Europe, a similar revolution was brewing across the Atlantic. In Massachusetts, the Dixon Ticonderoga company, founded in the early 19th century, would become America's most iconic pencil brand. Using graphite mined in New England and wood from American forests, Dixon streamlined the process of mass production. Its pencils, particularly the yellow No. 2, would become a staple in classrooms, offices, and government institutions across the country. But pencil making wasn't just about scaling up. It was about solving problems. One of the earliest mechanical challenges was how to create precise grooves in wooden slats to hold the graphite core. Early craftsmen used knives or chisels, but this was time-consuming and often inaccurate. To address this, inventors developed specialized grooving machines that could cut perfect channels into thin wooden slats. The next step was fitting the graphite core. The earliest mass-production methods used sawdust and glue mixtures to hold the cores in place. Later, more advanced glues and hot pressing techniques ensured the cores stayed centered and stable. The casings, typically made from cedar, were split in half, the core inserted into one groove, and the other half glued on top. Then came trimming. The pencil was cut to size, shaped often into a hexagon or round form, sanded, and eventually lacquered or painted. Each of these steps was eventually mechanized. By the late 19th century, fully integrated pencil factories were running in the US, Germany, France, Austria, and Japan. Pencils could now be produced not in dozens or hundreds but in thousands per day. Machines handled everything from cutting and grooving to gluing, shaping, painting, and stamping the company's name. But even with automation, many parts of the process required careful oversight. Quality graphite cores could still break during insertion, wood could splinter or warp. Paint needed to be evenly applied, and branding had to be stamped legibly onto each finished pencil. The most successful companies were those that balanced mechanical efficiency with strict quality control. In this new industrial age, pencils became symbols not just of function, but of national pride. German pencils were prized for their precision and smoothness. French pencils, like those from were known for their richness of tone, especially among artists. American pencils emphasized durability and reliability. This wasn't just marketing, it was identity. Each country's pencils reflected its industrial character, and so, by the end of the 19th century, the pencil had entered a golden age. Mass production had brought prices down, standardization had made them universally usable, and branding had made them recognizable around the world. But there were still challenges ahead. Different regions used different types of wood. Some were more sustainable than others. Not all graphite was equal. Not all labor conditions were ethical. And as competition grew fiercer, pencil companies began looking for new ways to set themselves apart. From the smoothness of the core, to the softness of the eraser, to the shine of the lacquer. The pencil had conquered the workshop. Now it would take on the world. By the turn of the 20th century, pencils were no longer made by hand in back rooms or artisan shops. They were mass-produced by the millions in factories across Europe, North America, and Asia. But with mass production came something new: mass competition. Pencil companies, once small family ventures, were now industrial giants. And as with any industry on the rise, the battlefield shifted from raw materials and labor to something even more strategic: brand identity. One of the most visible signs of this competition was something almost absurdly simple: the color yellow. The bright, instantly recognizable hue wasn't chosen at random. In the late 1800s, manufacturers began painting pencils to differentiate their products from competitors. The yellow pencil, specifically, became a global icon thanks to the Koh-i-Noor Hardtmuth Company, based in what is now the Czech Republic. Founded in 1790 by Joseph Hardtmuth, Koh-i-Noor introduced the yellow pencil as a premium product. Its bright color, inspired by the Austrian royal colors and, supposedly, the exotic prestige of Chinese graphite, which was believed to be among the finest in the world. Other companies quickly followed suit. In America, Dixon Ticonderoga adopted the yellow barrel for its flagship No. 2 pencil, further cementing it in public consciousness. Over time, the yellow pencil became the standard in many countries, especially for school use. But branding went far beyond color. Companies began carving out identities based on craftsmanship, consistency, and character. Faber-Castell leaned into tradition and heritage. Staedtler emphasized precision and German engineering. Mitsubishi and Tombow, rising stars from Japan, focused on smoothness, elegance, and performance, particularly for artists. Each brand developed its own formula, its own feel. Some pencils were softer, ideal for sketching. Others were harder, better suited for drafting or note-taking. The core of the pencil, the blend of graphite and clay, became a carefully guarded recipe, with each company treating it like a kind of alchemy. Meanwhile, the grading system H for hardness, B for blackness, became globally accepted, allowing artists and engineers to choose their tools with surgical precision. A 4H pencil would leave a sharp, faint line, ideal for technical drawings. A 6B pencil, soft and rich, was beloved by artists for its depth and texture. Manufacturers also innovated beyond the core. The wood casing, often made of California incense cedar, was prized for its ability to sharpen cleanly without splintering. But as demand increased, alternatives were sought. Some companies turned to basswood, gelatong, or recycled materials. Others explored composite casings made from resins or plastic blends. Pencil tips were capped with erasers, increasingly refined for performance and aesthetics. The ferrule, the small metal band that holds the eraser, was perfected through trial and error, becoming a recognizable feature of American-style pencils. In Japan and Europe, many high-end pencils omitted the eraser altogether, opting for a more elegant, streamlined design. Instead of functionality, these pencils were statement stools meant to be paired with dedicated erasers, carried in leather cases, and handled with care. With growing markets in education, art, architecture, and engineering, pencil companies expanded globally. Factories opened in South America, Africa, Southeast Asia. Brands like Natarai and Apsara in India began serving domestic and export markets, making high-quality pencils at affordable prices. It was around this time that the pencil, once a luxury item, became truly universal. No longer a tool of the elite, it was now found in nearly every home, classroom, and office across the industrialized world. It was given away as promotional material, sold in bulk, handed to children in school kits and construction workers on job sites. The pencil had become so common, so widespread, that people stopped noticing it altogether, a victim of its own success. And yet, within that ubiquity, innovation never stopped. In Germany, Faber-Castell introduced its perfect pencil, a high-end writing instrument with a built-in extender and sharpener. In the US, Blackwing pencils, originally produced by Eberhard Faber, earned cult status among writers, musicians, and animators for their smoothness and unique half-hex design. After being discontinued in the late 1990s, Blackwing was revived by Palomino in the 2010s, leading to a pencil renaissance among creatives. Limited editions were released, forums buzzed with reviews, and suddenly, the pencil wasn't just a tool again, it was a statement. Collectors began trading vintage pencils. Artists demanded specific brands. Writers chose pencils the way chefs choose knives. The competition never ended, it just changed shape. And behind the scenes, manufacturers still wrestled with old challenges, sourcing sustainable wood, maintaining consistency, balancing cost with quality. A good pencil had to sharpen cleanly, write smoothly, and feel just right in the hand. Not too heavy, not too light, not too slick, not too rough. And if it broke too easily, into the bin it went. For companies that had been making pencils for over 150 years, reputation was everything. In this landscape, a pencil wasn't just a stick of wood and graphite. It was a product of precision engineering, marketing strategy, and global logistics. It passed through forests, factories, cargo ships, and store shelves before finally landing in a pocket, a pencil case, or a cup on a desk, a journey hundreds of years in the making, and still not finished. As the 20th century gave way to the 21st, the pencil faced a new kind of challenge, not from rivals or war, but from something far more subtle. The rise of the digital age brought with it computers, smartphones, tablets, and styluses. Writing, once a necessity, was now optional. Documents were typed, not drafted. Drawings were rendered, not sketched. Notes were taken on screens. Entire generations were growing up without ever sharpening a pencil. And yet, the pencil persisted. Why? Because in the face of automation and digitization, the pencil remained something deeply human, tactile, intimate, immediate. But for it to stay relevant, the way it was made had to evolve. Today, pencil manufacturing is an intricate blend of automation, craftsmanship, and logistical precision. Modern factories are marvels of efficiency. In a typical facility, say Faber-Castell's factory in Stein, Germany, or Musgrove's plant in Tennessee, production starts with the wood. The most sought-after material remains California incense cedar, straight-grained, aromatic, and soft enough to sharpen cleanly. Logs are cut into pencil-length blocks and then sliced into thin slats. These slats are dried, seasoned, and graded for consistency. Machines groove each slat with absolute precision, up to 8 grooves at once, and place pencil cores into each channel. The cores themselves are no longer made of solid graphite. Instead, they're created using an optimized blend of graphite powder, clay, waxes, and binding agents, extruded into long strings and kill-fired at controlled temperatures. The recipe varies by brand and by the desired hardness grade. The difference between an HB and a 6B is the ratio of clay to graphite, and a slight tweak in temperature or moisture content can change the way a pencil writes. Once the cores are in place, a second grooved slat is glued on top, forming what's called a pencil sandwich. The sandwiches are pressed under rollers, then allowed to dry and harden. Next comes shaping. The square slats pass through cutting machines that shape them into hexagons, rounds, or triangles. After shaping, they're smoothed with fine sandpaper rollers and moved to lacquering stations. Here, pencils are dipped or sprayed with up to 10 coats of lacquer, process that protects the wood and gives the pencil its final color. Some are left natural, showing the grain of the wood. Others are coated in glossy finishes, often color-coded by hardness or brand identity. Branding is stamped on the barrel using foil embossing, laser etching, or ink printing. High-end pencils might also feature dipped ends, colored caps, or ferrules and erasers crimped onto one end. A final quality control pass ensures each pencil meets strict tolerances: no warped barrels, no off-center cores, no cracking lacquer. And all of this happens at high speed. Many factories produce hundreds of thousands of pencils per day, each one perfectly uniform. But even as automation took over, pencil manufacturers faced another modern pressure: sustainability. Forests were shrinking. Climate concerns were rising. Consumers were becoming more conscious of where their products came from, when they cost the planet. To respond, many manufacturers adopted eco-certification standards, sourcing wood from responsibly managed forests. The FSC, Forest Stewardship Council, and PEFC, Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification labels, became common on pencil boxes. Some brands went further. Companies like Harren, Dacre, and Sprout experimented with recycled materials, bioplastics, or plantable pencils embedded with seeds that could be planted after use. Others focused on minimizing waste, recycling leftover wood shavings, and reusing broken cores in new batches. Even the packaging evolved. Pencil boxes went from plastic to cardboard. Branding shifted to emphasize eco-friendliness and carbon footprint. All of this is part of the pencil's quiet survival strategy: adapt, but don't lose its essence. Because despite all of the changes, one thing remains true: the pencil is still one of the most efficient, versatile tools ever invented. It doesn't need to be charged. It doesn't crash. It doesn't go out of date. It just works. It draws when you press harder. It shades when you tilt it. It invites mistakes and lets you erase them. It connects hand to mind in a way no screen can replicate. And perhaps that's why, even now, it thrives. Artists still prefer it for its responsiveness. Architects still sketch with it to explore ideas. Writers still reach for it in the quiet hours. In classrooms, in workshops, in studios, and in remote villages where power is scarce, the pencil endures. More than that, it resonates. It reminds us that creation doesn't require perfection, that beginnings can be erased, that ideas can be shaped, reshaped, refined, that even the simplest tool can carry the weight of thought, memory, and imagination. And so, the pencil continues evolving, surviving, and refusing to be forgotten, not because of nostalgia, but because the world still needs what only it can offer. Before a masterpiece hangs in a gallery, before a skyscraper pierces the skyline, before a film is shot or a novel is written, there is often a pencil. Simple, silent, and unassuming, the pencil is where so many great ideas begin. In the world of art, the pencil is not just a tool, it is the first voice of creation, the whisper before the symphony. For centuries, artists have turned to pencils not to finish a work, but to begin it, to feel out a gesture, trace the outline of an idea, or explore the contours of a thought not yet fully formed. The pencil doesn't demand commitment, it invites exploration. Even in the Renaissance, long before the modern graphite pencil took shape, artists used silver point charcoal and lead styluses to sketch preparatory drawings. These drawings, fragile and often unseen, were the foundation of frescoes, sculptures, and murals that would last centuries. But it was the arrival of the modern pencil in the 17th and 18th centuries that changed the landscape of visual art. Suddenly, artists had access to a portable, affordable, and infinitely reusable tool. No ink to spill, no brushes to clean, just pressure, paper, and thought. Leonardo da Vinci, though he lived before the modern pencil's invention, captured the ethos perfectly. His notebooks are filled with tiny sketches, doodles, notes, and endless dance of ideas. Later artists like Michelangelo used lead styluses to draft and iterate. When graphite became widely available in the 17th century, it was quickly embraced by generations of artists. By the 19th century, pencils had become essential to the artist's toolkit. Ingres, Delacroix, and used them to study anatomy, light, and texture. So did Degas, whose pencil and pastel studies reveal the movement and grace of the ballet dancers he so famously painted. Pencil sketching wasn't just preparation, it became an art form in itself. With its unmatched tonal range from whisper-soft grays to deep, rich blacks, pencil allowed artists to shade with nuance, layer textures, and build atmosphere. Cross-hatching, stippling, smudging, these techniques took full advantage of what only graphite could offer. In the 20th century, modern and contemporary artists embraced the pencil with new intensity. Pablo Picasso could sketch a bull with a few confident lines. Henry Moore filled notebooks with soft, organic forms. Cy Twimbly, David Hockney, and Gerhard Richter all explored graphite and pencil as mediums in their own right, not just tools for drafts. And beyond the fine art world, pencils ruled in the fields of architecture, industrial design, and animation. Frank Lloyd Wright, Zaha Hadid, Charles and Ray Eames all began with sketches, just pencil and paper. In animation studios, rows of artists would spend months crafting pencil drawings by hand. Disney's early films, Snow White, Pinocchio, Fantasia were built from millions of graphite lines. Even now, in the age of digital animation, storyboards often begin with rough pencil thumbnails. It's fast, it's fluid, it's flexible, because the pencil doesn't fight you. It follows your hand. It lets you think aloud, visually. It gives you permission to make mistakes, to erase, to try again. In this way, the pencil has always represented process over product. A sketchbook is not a gallery, it is a laboratory, and pencils are the tools of experiment. That is their quiet power. They do not demand perfection. They offer freedom. They are often the first tool placed in a child's hand. When they begin to draw, a pencil doesn't require training. It doesn't intimidate. Anyone can pick one up and begin. From cave paintings to concept art, the journey from image to idea often begins with a pencil. Even in today's world, dominated by digital tablets and design software, many artists still return to graphite for one reason: connection. The pencil connects eye to hand to brain. In real time, there is no interface, no lag, no battery life, just friction, just feel. When an architect sharpens their 2H to draw a clean line, or an animator lays down the first rough shape of a character's face, or a student shadows in the dark side of a still life, they are participating in a tradition hundreds of years old, a tradition that values invention over perfection. The pencil is where things begin, where risk is low and possibilities are endless. And that is why, in the world of art, the pencil has never been replaced. It endures not because it is perfect, but because it lets the artist fail, learn, adapt, and create, one stroke at a time. While the pencil's influence on visual art is profound, its impact on the written word is equally deep and often overlooked. Before the age of typewriters, word processors, and digital keyboards, authors relied heavily on pencils to capture their earliest ideas. The pencil was the quiet partner to creativity, the tool that transformed fleeting thoughts into tangible drafts. Many celebrated writers preferred pencils for their flexibility. They could write, erase, rewrite without the permanence of ink. The ability to revise easily was invaluable in an art form where words must be refined and reshaped endlessly. Ernest Hemingway, known for his terse prose and exacting standards, famously carried a pencil with him to write first drafts. The pencil allowed him to sketch out sentences, cross out unnecessary words, and restructure paragraphs fluidly. Similarly, Virginia Woolf often wrote in pencil, appreciating the way it allowed her to capture thoughts before they crystallized into prose. The act of writing with a pencil creates a unique rhythm, a tactile, physical connection to language. Unlike tapping keys, the pencil requires deliberate movement, which some writers say encourages deeper reflection. Notebooks filled with penciled notes, sketches, and marginalia revealed the messy, non-linear process behind great works of literature. These notebooks are cherished artifacts, showing the human hand behind the art. Beyond literature, pencils have played roles in film and popular culture, sometimes subtly, sometimes strikingly. Consider the pencil as a cinematic prop. It can signify creativity, intelligence, or simplicity. In the 1998 movie The Matrix, the character Neo is handed a pencil, which he bends and twists with his mind, an iconic scene symbolizing breaking free from the constraints of perceived reality. In the world of animation and comics, the pencil is revered as the artist's sacred tool. Iconic creators like Charles Schulz, the mind behind Peanuts, and Stan Lee of Marvel Comics, began every story with pencil sketches. Pencils have also served as symbols of resistance and freedom. During World War II, pencils were used by spies and resistance fighters to write coded messages or draft plans. The pencil's low-tech simplicity made it less likely to draw suspicion than radios or other communication devices. In schools around the world, pencils represent learning, growth, and possibility. They are often the first instrument a child uses to write their name, to tell their story, to express their identity. This symbolism has made pencils a motif in art and literature themselves, metaphors for beginnings, for the potential to rewrite one's future, or the impermanence of life's marks. The phrase "to the point" or pencil in an event reflects this pencil as tool for planning and tentative commitment. Pencils have even inspired music and poetry. The American folk singer Bob Dylan referenced pencils in his lyrics as symbols of creation and change. In recent years, the pencil has enjoyed a kind of renaissance as a symbol of mindfulness, a counterpoint to the distractions of digital devices. Writing or drawing by hand with a pencil is seen as a way to slow down, focus, and reconnect. Collectors treasure rare pencils as objects of craftsmanship and nostalgia. From vintage Blackwings to limited editions featuring unique woods or cores, today, the pencil stands at the intersection of tradition and innovation, embodying centuries of human creativity in a simple stick of wood and graphite. It's a humble object, yes, but also a profound one, a reminder that some of the greatest ideas began not with a keyboard or touchscreen but with a pencil held in a hand, ready to make a mark on the blank page. In today's world, the pencil exists in a paradoxical space. On one hand, it is a centuries-old tool, simple, analog, and tactile. On the other, it faces relentless pressure from a rapidly digitizing society. Smartphones, tablets, laptops, and styluses dominate communication and creativity. Typing is faster. Drawing software offers infinite undo. Cloud storage means ideas can live anywhere. So, what place does the pencil hold now? Surprisingly, it remains remarkably relevant. Despite predictions of its obsolescence, pencils continue to be used globally in classrooms, studios, offices, and homes. They thrive in places where electricity is scarce or unreliable. They endure because they offer something technology cannot: a direct, unfiltered connection between hand and paper, between thought and expression. This tactile quality is more than nostalgia. It is a mode of thinking. Studies show that writing or drawing by hand with a pencil can improve memory retention, creativity, and problem solving. The resistance of graphite against paper provides sensory feedback that enhances focus and engagement. For many, pencil and paper remain the preferred medium for brainstorming, sketching, and note-taking beyond personal preference. The pencil industry has also embraced modern manufacturing techniques that combine efficiency with craftsmanship. Today's pencil factories employ sophisticated automation, computer-controlled cutting, gluing, and lacquering systems that produce millions of pencils annually with incredible consistency. Advanced materials science has refined graphite blends to create a wider range of hardness and smoothness. Eco-friendly finishes and ergonomic designs cater to user comfort and environmental concerns. Speaking of environment, the pencil industry has made significant strides towards sustainability. As global awareness of climate change grows, pencil manufacturers face mounting pressure to source wood responsibly and reduce their carbon footprint. Many have adopted certifications like the Forest Stewardship Council (FSC) and the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certification (PEFC), ensuring that the cedar and other woods used come from well-managed forests. Additionally, innovations in materials include using recycled wood and paper, experimenting with alternative woods like bamboo, and developing biodegradable pencils that decompose naturally after use. Some companies have introduced plantable pencils embedded with seeds that can be planted when the pencil becomes too short to use. This creative blend of utility and sustainability has captured the fascination of environmentally conscious consumers worldwide. At the same time, manufacturers continue to balance tradition and innovation. While some pencils still embrace the classic hexagonal cedar design, others experiment with unique shapes, colors, and materials to appeal to a new generation. In classrooms, pencils remain a foundational learning tool, helping children develop fine motor skills and literacy. Their simplicity and affordability make them accessible to millions globally. At the same time, pencils coexist with digital tools. Hybrid devices like styluses for tablets aim to replicate the pencil's tactile feedback, but few match the immediacy and intimacy of a pencil on paper. As technology advances, the pencil's role may shift, but its essence remains unchanged. It is not just a tool for writing or drawing, it is a bridge between past and future, tradition and innovation, analog and digital. In the next section, we will explore some of the exciting innovations shaping the pencil's future, as well as the cultural and educational roles it may continue to play in a world dominated by screens. Even in the age of artificial intelligence, touchscreens, and wireless everything, the pencil continues to evolve not through obsolescence, but through reinvention. Innovators and designers around the world are pushing the boundaries of what a pencil can be. Some of the most fascinating recent developments are in materials. We now see pencils made from recycled newspapers, compressed into tight, durable shafts that can be sharpened like traditional wood. Others are crafted from coffee grounds, plastic waste, even fabric fibers, offering a second life to what would otherwise become landfill. And yet, they write smoothly, reliably, like any other pencil. There are also biodegradable pencils, designed with zero plastic, zero metal, and minimal packaging. Some decompose in soil, leaving behind only natural residue. A few even contain a capsule at the end with a seed inside. When the pencil is too short to use, you can plant it, and within weeks, see sprouts of basil, lavender, or wildflowers. These aren't gimmicks. They're part of a broader movement to align even the simplest tools with a more sustainable, responsible future. But innovation hasn't stopped at materials. It's extended into form and function, too. In Japan, companies like Kitaboshi and Tombow have designed pencils with hexagonal curves, ergonomic angles, and shock-absorbing cores, improving grip, reducing hand fatigue, and preventing core breakage. Others have added high-performance erasers, magnetic ferrules, or stylus-compatible tips to hybridize analog and digital interaction. Meanwhile, the smart penciler stylus in pencil form is being developed with increasing sophistication. Companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Wacom have engineered styluses with pressure sensitivity, tilt detection, and even haptic feedback, all to simulate the feel of graphite on paper. They're fast, responsive, precise, and yet millions of people still prefer the real thing, a simple wood pencil for drafting, sketching, thinking. Why? Because it's not just about the marks it makes. It's about what it represents. The pencil stands for authenticity, for impermanence, for the freedom to start over. It's the antithesis of the permanent, digital ink we leave online. It doesn't autocorrect, track you, or store data in the cloud. It's private, personal, and immediate. More than anything, the pencil symbolizes beginnings. For students in their first classroom, for architects sketching their first building, for writers jotting the first line of a novel, for engineers diagramming their first invention, for children, inmates, scientists across cultures and continents, the pencil is often the first tool handed to someone when they are about to express themselves. This is why, even as the world digitizes, pencils retain a deep cultural role. They are found in emergency kits, classrooms, voting booths, and journals. They're used by astronauts in space because they don't leak like pens do. They're used by artists who prefer to feel the texture of their canvas, by designers who think best through their fingers, by carpenters who mark timber before they cut. In every setting, the pencil adapts. And so, we come to the question, does the pencil have a future? The answer is almost certainly yes, but not because it resists the future. Rather, it evolves with it. Pencils will continue to change. Their materials will become greener, their form more ergonomic, their role more specialized. But they will remain relevant because they fulfill a human need that technology can't quite replace. The need to create freely, instantly, and without fear of failure. Pencils don't beep or blink. They don't crash. They don't cost much. But they give us a way to begin, a way to think, a way to make our mark, however briefly. And in that quiet, enduring role, the pencil will always have a place, not just in the past, not just on paper, but in the future we are still writing. In times of peace, the pencil is a tool of creativity. In times of war, it becomes something else entirely, a tool of strategy, survival, and sometimes subterfuge. Long before modern military technology brought GPS, digital radios, and encrypted messaging to the battlefield, soldiers and officers relied on pencils, not just for drawing maps or taking notes, but for something much deeper, recording intelligence, planning operations, and preserving secrets. During World War I, the pencil was as essential to a soldier's kit as a helmet or rifle. Out in the trenches, cold, wet, and caked with mud, pens often failed. Ink would freeze or smudge, and paper could be ruined in an instant. The pencil, by contrast, was reliable. It could write upside down, under pressure, and in rain. Soldiers used it to write letters home, keep journals, and record positions of enemy artillery on maps. Commanders, meanwhile, used pencils to sketch tactical diagrams, write field orders, and revise strategies, often under fire. The pencil's greatest advantage was its erasability. Plans could be changed at a moment's notice. By World War II, the pencil had become even more critical, not just in the trenches, but in intelligence operations. Nowhere was this more true than in Britain, where the intelligence agency, MI6, working alongside the Special Operations Executive so began to experiment with modified pencils as tools of espionage. The most famous example came in the form of the spy pencil. At first glance it looked ordinary, a standard wooden pencil with a rubber on the end, but inside it hid secrets. Literally, some pencils were hollowed out to contain microfilm, maps, coded messages, or even miniature tools. Others were rigged with razor blades or tiny compasses embedded under the eraser. A few could even contain cyanide capsules, intended for agents who might be captured behind enemy lines. The SOE's technical section, often compared to the fictional Q branch in James Bond films, developed a variety of these hidden tools. Pencils became camouflage for communication, used by Allied agents in Nazi-occupied Europe to smuggle information across borders. One British firm, Charles Fraser Limited, a stationery company in London, was contracted to produce thousands of pencils for this very purpose. The company created pencils with hollow barrels that could store messages written in invisible ink. The ink was typically iron sulfate or lemon juice, invisible when dry and revealed only when heated. There were also message pencils, standard pencils embedded with chemically treated paper that could self-destruct when burned, leaving no trace of what had been written. These tools allowed resistance fighters, informants, and spies to pass intelligence under the noses of the Gestapo, the SS, and enemy informants. A simple pencil tucked in a coat pocket might contain the location of a weapons cache, the identity of a double agent, or the movement of enemy tanks. Even prisoners of war used pencils to outsmart their captors. At Starlock Luft 3, the POW camp made famous by the Great Escape, Allied airmen used pencils to forge documents, draft tunnel blueprints, and send coded letters to MI9 back home. Some prisoners used pencils to draw maps in their letters, invisible to the naked eye, but legible when viewed with special lenses. Others sharpened their pencils into tools, carving small keys or cutting cloth strips from their uniforms. British intelligence wasn't alone in these efforts. Across the Atlantic, the OSA's Office of Strategic Services, the precursor to the CIA, also used pencils in its covert toolkits. Their field agents were trained to carry writing instruments that doubled as concealed weapons or transmission devices. The pencil's beauty lay in its banality. It didn't raise suspicion, it was forgettable, and in espionage, being forgettable is a kind of superpower. By disguising secrets inside something so ordinary, Allied forces were able to bypass checkpoints, infiltrate enemy networks, and gather intelligence critical to the war effort. But pencils weren't just hiding information, they were recording it. Behind enemy lines, agents had no access to typewriters, cameras, or computers. Instead, they relied on pencils to write in field notebooks, observing troop movements, sketching buildings, noting watch patterns, and eavesdropping on conversations, all by hand. These notebooks were sent back to headquarters or memorized and burned. But every piece of intel, every critical update, began the same way, with a pencil. It's strange to think of a pencil, a tool we associate with schoolwork and sketching, as an object of life and death. But during the great conflicts of the 20th century, it was precisely that. A pencil might carry a soldier's final words, or the location of an enemy bunker, or the blueprint for a mission that would save hundreds of lives, all hidden in plain sight. The pencil's value in warfare didn't end with World War II. As global tensions shifted into the long, icy grip of the Cold War, espionage became a more subtle, more psychological battlefield, and once again, the pencil was at the center of it, camouflaged in plain sight. One of the most fascinating examples came from the intelligence standoff between the United States and the Soviet Union. As both superpowers developed more advanced surveillance technologies, they also refined the smallest, simplest ones, because sometimes, the low-tech solution was the most reliable. The CIA and the KGB each developed a range of concealed tools hidden inside everyday objects, and among the most effective and least suspicious of these was the humble pencil. The CIA's Technical Services Division, again, think James Bond's Q, designed pencils that were far more than writing instruments. Some were crafted to carry rolled microfilm containing surveillance photos, maps, or encryption keys. Others housed chemical agents, explosives, or shortwave radio components. There were pencils rigged with needles, intended for close-quarters sabotage, covert assassination tools that could deliver poisons through a single jab. Others contained retractable blades, small enough to pass unnoticed, but sharp enough to be used in emergencies. It sounds like fiction, but declassified files confirm that these tools existed and were field-tested during missions across Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The Soviets had their own variations. KGB operatives used pencils not just to smuggle microdot-tiny photographic images reduced to the size of a period, but also to encode messages in steganographic text, using invisible ink hidden beneath handwritten reports. To the untrained eye, it was an ordinary document. But under heat, or certain light filters, the real message would appear. One popular Soviet trick was using pencil lead infused with iron salts, which could be reactivated later to display a hidden message when treated with the correct chemical solution. Meanwhile, field agents were trained in what was called dead-drop communication, where messages or items would be passed between spies without direct contact. Often the message would be hidden inside a pencil and left in a predetermined location, behind a brick in a wall, inside a hollowed tree trunk, or beneath a park bench. A single pencil could carry a life-saving update, a warning, a name, a date, or a death sentence. But it wasn't just intelligence agencies who relied on covert pencils. Throughout the 20th century, resistance fighters and political dissidents across the globe adopted similar techniques. In Nazi-occupied Europe, resistance members used pencils to forge identity papers, draw escape routes, and pass secret messages. Pencils helped disguise entire underground operations as simple academic or clerical work. In apartheid-era South Africa, civil rights movements in the US, and revolutionary groups across Latin America, pencils became tools of silent rebellion. With the right kind of eraser and a little creativity, anyone could become a printer, a forger, a writer of subversive truth. Then there's one of the most curious, enduring legends in Cold War lore, the space race pencil myth. As the story goes, when NASA began sending astronauts into space, it needed a way for them to write in zero gravity. Pens, which rely on gravity to feed ink, didn't work. So NASA allegedly spent millions developing a space pen that could write in any direction, even upside down. The Soviets, the joke goes, simply used a pencil. The story is only half true. Yes, early NASA astronauts used pencils, but they quickly realized the danger. In space, broken graphite tips could float away, potentially shorting electrical components or being inhaled. Also, wood shavings posed a fire hazard in a pure oxygen environment. So NASA eventually adopted the Fisher space pen, which used pressurized ink cartridges and worked safely in zero gravity. But they didn't invent it. Paul Fisher did, privately, and sold the pens to both NASA and the Soviet. In the end, both sides abandoned the pencil in orbit. Still, the tale has stuck around because it highlights something true about the pencil: its reputation for reliability. Whether in war, resistance, or outer space, the pencil symbolizes simplicity, resourcefulness, and access. That's also why the pencil became a tool of choice for covert journalism, especially under authoritarian regimes. In countries where press freedom was restricted, like East Germany, the Soviet Union, and later China and North Korea, dissidents and journalists used pencils to write stories in secret. Their tools were small, quiet, and easy to hide. Even today, pencils continue to play a role in modern spycraft, albeit less dramatically. In intelligence fieldwork, low-tech tools are sometimes preferred over high-tech ones, because they leave less of a digital trail. A piece of paper written in pencil can be burned, a flash drive can be traced. The spy's pencil may no longer carry a blade or a microdot, but its stealth and silence still matter. It is, at its core, a tool of discretion. And in the shadowy world of secrets and lies, discretion is everything. As the Cold War wore on, the battle between East and West moved into more invisible terrain: psychological warfare, misinformation, and ideological influence. And while rockets soared and satellites circled overhead, back on the ground, some of the most impactful work still began with a pencil. In divided cities like Berlin, pencils were used to draw border layouts, draft surveillance blueprints, and copy secret messages from bugged conversations. Many East German citizens recorded the names of informants in their neighborhoods using pencils, never pens. Pencil markings were easier to erase, easier to conceal, easier to deny. In both East and West, spies continued to carry simple writing tools, not just for field notes, but because they still needed to blend in. A fountain pen might draw attention, a briefcase might be searched, but a pencil in a shirt pocket, ordinary, innocent, invisible, and yet powerful. The Berlin Wall may have been built from concrete and steel, but much of the resistance to it was first drafted with graphite. Dissidents wrote underground newspapers by hand. Students copied forbidden poetry in schoolbooks. Activists scribbled notes during secret meetings in apartments lit only by candles, their windows covered by blankets. These small, quiet acts of defiance were not what the world saw on the evening news, but they were the foundation of movements that eventually brought regimes to their knees. When the wall finally fell in 1989, among the millions of images, people dancing on the concrete, chiseling it down with hammers, were notebooks and scraps of paper, found in the archives of the Stasi, East Germany's secret police. Many were written in pencil, evidence of betrayal, evidence of courage. This is where the pencil transforms from a tool of secrecy to a symbol of resilience, a symbol of survival, a symbol of truth. In the 21st century, the pencil has appeared in places of protest, from Tahrir Square to Hong Kong, from Iranian student movements to Ukrainian resistance networks. In many of these spaces, pencils have become both practical tools and powerful images, held up during protests, left behind in silence as memorials, or used to scrawl messages of hope on broken walls and barricades. In 2015, following the Charlie Hebdo terrorist attack in Paris, pencils became global emblems of freedom of speech. Artists and journalists around the world posted images of raised pencils, defiant, unshaken. A single drawing, shared on social media, showed a broken pencil but its tip rising again as a sharp point. The message was clear: you can break a pencil, but you can't erase the idea it writes. Even in prisons, where paper is monitored and ink can be confiscated, pencils have often remained the only way for inmates to record their thoughts, write letters, or document abuses. In countries with repressive regimes, pencils become instruments of witnessing, not just writing, but remembering. And that may be the pencil's most lasting legacy. Not its use in war or espionage, not its clever disguises or gadgets, but the fact that it is the tool people reach for when they want to tell the truth, quietly, safely, sometimes dangerously, always meaningfully. We end, perhaps appropriately, not with a dramatic escape or a spy novel flourish, but with something quieter: a pencil on a table, a blank page, and a person, sitting in silence, preparing to speak. They could be anyone: a soldier, a student, a dissident, a spy. But what they're holding is the same thing that's been used for centuries: simple, forgettable, resilient, and always ready to make its mark. It began with a line scratched onto bark, etched into clay, burned into parchment, smudged across paper, a line that led us through caves and empires, through wars, dreams, blueprints, and love letters. And somewhere along that long winding line, just a few hundred years ago, we made something simple: wood, graphite, a point, and we called it a pencil. No batteries, no cords, no connection to the cloud. Yet somehow it connected us to everything, to ourselves, to each other, to the world we imagined and the world we built. The pencil has never demanded attention. It has no screen, no flash, no voice. But its silence has always invited ours. It is the first tool many of us held as children when we tried to understand what it meant to write. The first thing we gripped with a trembling hand when spelling our own names, drawing our first houses, writing our first lies, our first truths. It is a tool of rough drafts and quiet revisions, of architects sketching skylines that do not yet exist, of students solving equations that first look impossible, of prisoners writing letters, of lovers doodling names, of scientists sketching molecules, of artists trying, failing, erasing, and trying again. A pencil is not just an object, it's a process, a promise. It's permission to begin and permission to begin again. It breaks, we sharpen it. It fades, we press harder. It makes mistakes, we turn it around and erase. And if we're lucky, we learn to see that not just as a limitation, but as a gift. We've followed this story across continents and centuries, from Roman styluses to graphite mines beneath English hills, from Napoleonic engineers to Victorian schoolrooms, from NASA's zero-gravity tests to Cold War spy drops in alleyways, from Da Vinci's delicate sketches to resistance fighters' coded letters, and into our own hands, where the pencil still lives not as a relic, but as a companion, quiet, faithful, ready in a world that moves faster every year. The pencil remains patient. It does not rush you. It does not finish your sentence. It waits. So when you hold one again, whether it's yellow, black, red, new, old, sharpened to a perfect point, or worn down to a stump, remember, it's not just a tool, it's a thread. From the first marks in ancient soot to the most delicate strokes in a modern sketchbook, the pencil has always drawn more than lines. It has drawn us forward, and the line, it continues.